Well, hello, we're back. Brad Foster and Felicity Zadro. We've changed locations. We wanted to see, remind ourselves what the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge looked like, and it looks pretty magnificent, as it always does.
It's wonderful.
We're in the AV1 control room again at the MCA, a different studio space here. Thank you to them and Divine Events who have done the theming. Remember, AV1 has studios two in Sydney, one in Melbourne and one on the Gold Coast. So you can get back and start communicating with your people and your prospects. Today, episode 3, we want to talk about the opportunities in the social media space and also building relationships with media people like me, Felicity.
Yes.
How are you?
Very
good?
well. Thanks, Brad.
Good. So social media first.
Yes.
It's a bit scary for some people, but they shouldn't be scared. What's available and how do you involve it or include it in what you're doing with your clients?
Yes, well, social media, it can be scary for some people who aren't really aware of what's going on and the power of those channels. And we know, of course, of Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter, but there's also a whole number of other channels that people need to work out what's best for them, including, the YouTubes of the world, etc. But really, when we think about what social media is, I think it's really halfway between a public relations strategy and a marketing strategy. And the reason I say that, it's a real merge because we tell stories, we build community, sometimes we sell things, we try and make people laugh, and we try and engage our prospects and customers and potentials. So really, it's a really good point to start thinking about, well, what is social media and how can it add value to my business? But take a step back. When we go to write for social media and to develop some content, we always need to know, what are we doing it for? What are we trying to communicate? Who is your business? What does it represent? Who is it in your industry? What are your history? And what's your brand and reputation? And then we work out, the key messages. Then we work out a content plan. And then we work out what's actually going to go on each of those channels.
Yep.
So, when social media came out and when I started my business, Brad, we didn't do social media for business.
No.
Really it's been the last 10 years that we've really integrated it into absolutely everything that we do now. But it's really important to think about, relevance, the same things, storytelling, key messages.
But it is different. You say
Yes.
The content that you would provide for Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever would be different than just putting a press release that you'd written that you were sending to media.
Absolutely.
Right.
Definitely.
Does it have is it a little bit more casual, would you say, or?
It can be, especially on those more social channels such as Facebook and Instagram. And Twitter we use a lot to talk to media, especially mass media. And LinkedIn, as you know, is where professionals meet and do business. So it's really important to get the different tones for each of those channels and make sure those, your writing is appropriate for those channels.
Okay, and is it, we talked about frequency in the previous episode. Is frequency something that you have to consider with social media? Is it a daily thing, a weekly thing? Do you work, when you work out a strategy, you work out all that kind of frequency and what you put where?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, one of the big things I'd say is that there's actually, when you get into managing social media channels, there's a lot more work than people, I think, initially think there is.
Yep.
And, I shudder when people tell me, they're going to give the intern the keys to the social media accounts.
Right.
It's where you can do the most damage most quickly. And it needs the respect of the communication profession to really work it properly. And I'm not talking about your own personal, what you did on the weekend, you can do whatever you like. But when you're representing a business, you really need to be considerate of that. So frequency, some people are going weekly, some people are going 3 times a week, some people will go once a week, but on 4 different channels. It really depends again on what you've got to say. Got anything relevant to say or interesting? But when people are just talking about themselves, I did this, I'm thinking this, as you know, you'll probably just turn off. It's a bit boring after a while.
Yeah, it's one thing is that with social media, say Facebook for example, there is an opportunity for people who receive it or see it to comment, which can be a good and bad thing, because you can get bad comments, can't you?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you would have to have something in place to manage that.
Yes.
There wouldn't be bad comments with any companies you worked with, I'm sure, Felicity. They'd all be favourable.
We've had a few doozies in our time. So definitely it's important to set up your channels properly. For example, when Facebook came out, some people were using personal pages as business pages. That's not so common these days. But in your business page, you need to have the rules of engagement. So you need to very clearly say in your About section, what language is appropriate, what isn't, when you will ask people to move off the channel or even delete their posts, which is not something that we recommend a lot of. It's better to manage it. But there's also lots of tools that you can manage where people aren't able to even type, swear words, and it will appear on your feed as well.
Yeah.
So
it's one of those things that I like it because people are opting in. You're not ramming a message down somebody's throat. If they're interested in it, they will engage in it. Last year we had ran a pet competition for people who owned pets in the business events industry. It's nothing to do with business events. It was about the people in the industry, and that went crazy.
Yeah.
We had so many entries, people sending in photos of their dogs and cats, and so it does have great potential. There's also the opportunity to measure results, I believe.
Absolutely. The metrics are there, and they're also getting better. And you can measure anything from, engagement to looks and likes, etc. But that's quite controversial. Like, there is a lot of discussion about the value of that and the impact of that. And most people would know that, say, for example, Instagram has turned off the counter, so you can't see, as someone else looking at someone else's feed, you can't see how many people like them.
Yeah.
So that had a big influence on the ambassadors and the influencers who were being used to promote brands and products. So it's a very big topic. There's lots of interesting things to consider, but it's certainly 100% needs to be part of pretty much most businesses' communications.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it basically comes back to, we're talking about, you've got to have a story. You've got to have something to tell. You can't just post anything up there. Well, you can, but it's not going to work, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of testing as well, because it's so immediate, and building channels and building communities. I would just say, just try things. Try things about your own staff and then see what reaction you get. Try things about research and see what you get, and be a little bit fluid with it.
Okay, cool. Now we're going to also talk about building relationships with journalists and editors. There's a perception that some of them are a little bit scary.
You're very scary, Brad.
I'm not scary, Felicity. I'm a pussycat, but I know that there are some, because I've worked on the other side, and some journalists, you don't. It's not fun giving them a ring or sometimes you email them and they never respond. I don't know what's up with that. I try to respond to most people, or as many people as I can, but what's your strategy at Zadro to build relationships?
Yeah, it's such a good one. I mean, I know you like to have a coffee, but there's a lot of journos and editors who wouldn't want to have a coffee. So some people don't answer their phones.
Yeah.
Some people only want emails.
Rude.
So I guess it's all about empathy and putting yourself into their shoes and understanding the flow and the editorial deadlines of their media outlet. So for example, dealing with a radio producer or a radio journalist is very different to dealing with a trade publication who publishes once a month. The deadlines are different, etc. So, you know, we're really looking at when you're pitching that story, what relationship you've had before. But really, I guess my goal is to make that job of that media outlet and the journalist or the editor the easiest possible. So just very recently I ran a very large mass media campaign down in Victoria. I was based in Sydney. And the media that I was dealing with, you know, they want someone to talk to, they want to know when they're available. And so I go into those pitching with, I've got this person on this day and they can talk about X, Y, and Z. You've got to be informed. And you've got to have really good talent, we call it, lined up, prepared, briefed. Who are also trained in dealing with the media. That's very important. But I think, look, the best way to build relationships with media is understand their pressures, understand their media outlet. Are they TV? What time? What's their audience? And just give them exactly what they need when they need it.
Does it help in the long run to take the time to do that rather than just send out the blanket press release to the editor in the finance section or whatever it might be?
Yes, it does, of course. It always is. And then you've got to balance that with the priorities and the budget and all that kind of stuff. So when you're working in-house and you'll have a lot more time and, you know, as you go a bit deeper with your clients, with your employer, it's sometimes a different way of approaching it. But look, absolutely, where you can understand a media and their pressures, that's the best case scenario. So if you need that information beforehand, then that's what you need.
I think it's important to remember too that a journalist needs a PR person and vice versa. We're all in this together, Felicity.
We are, Brad, and we're often pitched against each other, but actually we are. And you know, you see during COVID, our media outlets are struggling. There's less advertising, but also a lot of PR people being put out of work. So where are those stories being harvested and developed? And pushing through. So yeah, we absolutely need each other.
And that's a great segue because that's exactly what we're talking about in our last, fourth and final segment. We're getting a little bit philosophical, talking about where the media may be going or where the media is going, where are the journalists going, why you should include advertising in your marketing budget, because if you don't, there won't be any media.
Absolutely, I look forward to it.
Sounds good. We'll see you soon.